Reflection, Chapter 13. Shang slipped inside first, then Shishi. Mulan had to shove the lion through the cave with her weight. Shishi barely fit. She heard him whimper as he inched his way through, nails scraping against the cave walls. Mulan went next, sliding carefully through the entrance to the dank, musty cave. A few steps into the cave, she bent her head so it wouldn't hit the ceiling. Suddenly, something grabbed her leg and pulled. She gasped, kicking and blindly poking her weapon at her assailant. "Grab my tail," Shishi shouted, his voice echoing in the cave. Mulan reached for it. But even as Shishi pulled her through, the demons outside still had her foot. Then someone jabbed her ankle with his spear, and Mulan let out a cry of pain. "Ping!" she heard Shang shout. Biting her lip to hold in the pain, Mulan hurled her weapon at the demons outside, and Shishi yanked the rest of her into the cave. The walls trembled, pebbles and stones tumbling from the ceiling. Mulan covered her head with her hand and limped as fast as she could toward the opening on the other side. Her ankle burned, but she didn't stop to look at it. The demons tried to follow. The one in the front was too fat to make it through the cave's narrow opening, so he tried stabbing his spear at Mulan while the smaller demons around them tried crawling under his legs into the cave. Their claws scraped the earth as they attempted to scramble inside, but dirt and debris spilled over their eyes. The cave was collapsing. If Mulan didn't hurry, she'd be trapped inside. As the tunnel widened toward the other side, she barreled through and leapt for the exit. Shishi grabbed her collar with his teeth and pulled her out. That was close," she said, coughing. The fog was thinner on this side of the cave, but it still misted over the ground and hovered about their surroundings. She bent down to catch her breath and rubbed dirt out of her eyes. "Have we lost him?" "Until they find another way to this side, yes." With a sigh of relief, Mulan sat up. She tried to get to her feet, but her ankle still burned. "You're hurt," Shang said. She touched her foot, pressing the spot the demon had struck with his spear. Blood came back on her fingertips, but nothing was broken. "I'll be fine, it's nothing." Shang knelt in front of her, examining her ankle too. "You need to wrap it." "Later, there isn't time." "Will you be able to manage this climb?" Shishi rumbled. She looked up only to have her breath catch in her throat, just as the sight of the mountain of knives sent a wave of terror through her. It was magnificent, in a shocking, terrible sort of way. Thousands of knives and daggers covered the surface, packed so close they looked like silver stalks of grass. Mulan could see their hilts, but the blades were all shiny and clean, not a smear or speck of blood. That was somewhat reassuring, she supposed. Except there was no possible way for her to climb the mountain. Shang could, as nothing in Daiyu could harm him, but the knives were staked so close together, she couldn't possibly take a step between them. Or could she step on them, not without impaling herself? According to the legend, each dagger belongs to a bandit or murderer who is now in Daiyu, Shishi said at her side. "So they're demons?" "No, they're ghosts. Even bandits and murderers have some hope of leaving this place. Only those who commit the gravest misdeeds, such as killing one's family or one's ruler, become demons. They have to stay in Daiyu forever, since there's no hope of redemption for them. Everyone else becomes a ghost." Mulan suppressed a shudder. If she failed to bring Shang back to the real world, did that mean King Yama would change her into a demon? Staying in Daiyu forever would be bad enough, but to become one of those monsters? "We must be vigilant," Shishi went on. "The ghosts are known to haunt the area." "Great," Shang said dryly. "So if we go up this way, we fight ghosts and demons?" "The demons won't follow us, if we can find a way up." "And the ghosts?" Shang inquired. The lion shrugged. "Another reason to hurry." Shang didn't seem to like his guardian's strategy. He hesitated. "Ping, are you sure you can do this? It's a steep hike, even without the knives, and your ankle. Maybe we should find another way." "There isn't one," she said, hopping to her feet. It hurt to stand on her injured foot, but it wasn't bleeding anymore. She'd manage. "I can do it." "How?" Shang blurted. "You're not a ghost. You can't step on knives." Mulan pursed her lips, considering. "I'll come up with something." The scraping sounds in the cave still hadn't stopped. "You go ahead." "I'm not leaving you behind," Shang argued. "We have to make use of our resources. Maybe your armor—" "It isn't sturdy enough," Mulan interrupted. "Not by itself." Clapping her palms over her blade, Mulan pulled up the closest knife out of the mountain. "But this would help." She held the blade flat against her boot. "Yes, She could bind its flat side of her foot and bolster it with the armor plates from her shoulders. She'd do the same with her hands. That should be enough to protect her as she climbed, as long as she didn't fall forward or backward or put too much pressure on her injured ankle. Now she just needed something to tie the blades to her feet and hands. She wished she kept the rope from the empty well. Mulan looked around, then stared at Shishi's mane. Even after his tussle with Mangpo's trees, Shishi's elaborate braids had stayed intact. His hair was thick and long. It just might work. She grabbed the lion's mane and raised her knife. "I'll make it up to you somehow, but this is going to get both of us up the mountain." Shishi's orange eyes widened with horror, but he didn't react soon enough. With one swift slice, Mulan cut a handful of his braids and started tying the armor and blades over her hands and feet to protect her from the mountain. "My mane!" Shishi cried. Mulan cast Shishi an apologetic look, suddenly remembering how she cut her own hair before stealing her father's armor. Such a simple action, yet it changed everything. She'd severed ties with her old identity and gone from Mulan to Ping, from bride to soldier, from obedient daughter to a woman who led her own life. But what if she'd cut too many ties? What if when she went home her parents no longer recognized her? After all, she wasn't the same Mulan anymore. Sometimes she didn't even know who she was. She'd thought about going to war would show her, but things were never as easy as that. Mulan dropped the knife, shaking away her doubts. Shishi's braids felt heavy in her hands. "It'll grow back," she told him as warmly as she could. "And when it does, it'll be more majestic than it was before." She tightened the braid over her foot with a knot and gestured to the lion. "Come on, you're next. Give me your foot." "I don't need to wear any contraption," Shishi growled. "I am a stone lion, the great guardian of the esteemed Li family. These pitiful knives won't harm me." "You're not stone anymore." She started to tie several braids around Shishi's giant paws. He opened his mouth to argue, but the sound of the demon's drums cut him short. "They found us," said Shang. "Go," Shishi said, pushing Mulan toward the mountain with his head as soon as she finished Shishi's blade armor. "I'll follow." Mulan stared at her hands. She turned her gauntlets around as they cushioned her fingers and palms against the flats of the blades as she'd tied to her hands. "Here goes nothing." She took her first step on the mountain, balancing on what had to be the points of half a dozen sharpened blades. Her injured ankle wobbled and her arms began to fail. "Focus," Shang shouted. "Breathe, Ping. Gain control of your breath. Gain control of the situation." Inhale, exhale. Mulan expelled her breath. She didn't sink, and her foot hadn't been impaled. That was close. Beside her, Shang nodded, looking relieved. "Find your center. There you go." She didn't take time to congratulate herself. She took another step, and another. Shang followed. The knives did nothing to hurt him. He might as well have been stepping on flowers and rocks. Don't watch him, watch the ground. Her balance was precarious enough as it was. If she wasn't careful, the knives might cut through Shishi's braids and unbind her blade shoes. The key was to pick spots where the knives were staked at a steep, slanted angle, or lay almost horizontal. Mulan aimed for as many of those pockets as she could, stepping on the flats of the blades as if they were stairs, and using her palms for extra balance when she needed to. Even then, it didn't help that most of the knives and daggers were of different heights and widths. Her armor protected her from pricks, but Mulan could feel the effect of brushing against the knives. The sides of her feet, which the blades didn't cover, had already received multiple cuts. So it didn't help when the knives began to shudder. Thump, 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 pounded faraway drums. The demons were here. They'd made it through the tunnel, and now, one by one, they burst through the fog. The beat of the drums grew faster and faster. And the demons crackled at the sight of Mulan. Shang and Shishi cornered against the mountains of knives. They raised their swords and spears, stamping them against the ground as they drew closer. "Finish the lion and the short one," one of the demons shouted. "Take the spirit to Mangpo." The demon soldiers obeyed. They jabbed their spears at Shishi, and when the lion was too far up to attack, they started throwing their spears and plucking knives out of the mountain to toss at Shishi and Mulan. Mulan gasped, almost falling over as she evaded being impaled by a spear. Shang caught the end of the knife tied to her hand and steadied her. "You all right?" She nodded, but her lips pursed tight. "Kill the outsiders," the demons bellowed below. Shang's jaw tensed. "You and Shishi go ahead. I'll distract the demons." "No," Mulan said, taking another step. "We all stay together." "I can't be harmed. You can." Li Shang has a point, Shishi interrupted with a grunt. Someone needs to keep the demons busy, or else we're not going to get very far. No one gets left behind, Mulan said firmly. But below, the demons were gaining on them. Some had already started climbing the mountain of knives, using their thick armor as shields against the sharp knife points. The rest stayed on the ground, continuing to pull knives from the mountain and throw them at Mulan, Shang, and Shishi. Knives bounced and clanged against the mountain, one landing dangerously close to Mulan's leg. Still want to keep climbing? Shishi yelled at her. Incoming, Shang shouted. Duck! Mulan and the Guardian flattened as much as they could against the mountain, barely dodging the flying knives. The drum beats grew louder, closer. More of the demons were on the mountain now, and they scrambled up with knives in their mouths and swords and spears on their backs. At the speed they were climbing, the demons would catch up with them within minutes. Shishi shot Mulan a glare. We stay together, she repeated. No one gets left behind. Stubborn ping, Shishi harumphed. There's a reason I'm the great guardian of the Li family, and that is to protect you all. She turned to Shang. Li Shang, I am sorry I failed your father. I will not do the same to you. Without any warning, the lion leapt down the mountain, ripping through the fog, and landing in front of the demons as the blades that had been tied to him fell away. Shishi, wait! Mulan shouted. No! The drum beats stopped.